Welcome to my show about amazing people to know. Creativity is tough, but this is Artsy Fartsy things and stuff. So sit back and chill. Maybe we can all learn a new skill. You can never get enough of arts and thoughts and things and stuff.
Hello. Please forgive the interruptions and the low quality of this production. Everything here is done during the age of the pandemic, and our interviews are done via the internets, and they are problematic. So please forgive the beeps and blurps and stutters and skips and things like that, because it's the best we can do in the pandemic. And welcome to the second episode of Artsy Fartsy Things and Stuff, a conversational interview podcast about creative, amazing people doing creative, amazing things and stuff. First, let me apologize for all the audio dropouts in the most recent episode, the first episode of this show. The fancy professional mic that I spent a boatload of money on apparently no longer wants to work with my fancy computer that I spent way too much money on as well. So I'm troubleshooting what I can on the fly in the middle of a pandemic. That's it. Please bear with me. And secondly, y'all are in for a real treat today, as I have a fantastic conversation with Professor Phelyx, a true artsy fartsy through and through. He's a world-class mind-reading mentalist comedian, a corporate speaker, a fine artist, nationally acclaimed designer. He has performed as a variety artist in 3,000 burlesque shows. He was once a professional Andy Warhol historian. He also owns his own art gallery, and he has done some creative, amazing artworks with bleach. If you hang with us long enough, you might even have your mind read. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Today on this episode, we introduce you to Professor Phelyx. Hello, Professor. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
If you find a different or better way to describe it, please let me know, because I've had a difficult time for all of these years. I am a full-time performer. I've been doing that silliness for 40 years. And I perform dominantly as a mind-reading comedian. I started as a magician, and there was a natural segue into mentalism and mind reading.
Where are you originally from in this world?
I am from Denver, Colorado.
All right, so you're from Denver, and how did you go from a little boy kicking cans on the street in Denver to reading minds?
That was mostly because I was not outdoors kicking cans. I was learning magic tricks. I started very young. My first show was in 1981. And I had been studying for a couple of years at that point. And I suppose truth is stranger than fiction. My father was a homicide detective as a career, and he did that for decades. And, doing that kind of work offered so much gravity that he just sought some hobbies to add some levity to his life. So he studied clowning and magic, and apparently those were my formative years, because that's what got stuck under my skin.
I'm curious about your visual art as well.
Sure.
So you in the intro, you kind of talked a little, or you had me introduce you as somebody whose work that we might have encountered strolling through shops or on the internet. Like what kind of works are those?
I've done a great deal of commercial work in my younger years, my teenage and early 20s years. I worked dominantly in the music industry, creating show posters and album covers, and that's kind of segued into creating set designs and costume design and that kind of thing. I've always been just kind of an artsy fartsy sort of fellow. So I still do a considerable amount of commercial work. I don't really advertise that I do. I've maintained some clients for 20 some odd years, I suppose. But there's a number of commercial products out there that bear my work by some large companies, some small companies.
Anything that we can
talk about, or all non-disclosure agreements?
Oh no, there's non-disclosure with a couple of them, like a coffee company that ends in bucks. But yeah, fairly recently, I did a suite of wine labels for a winery aptly called Sleight of Hand Cellars out of Walla Walla, Washington.
That fits.
They're nationally distributed, which is lovely. I've worked in the magic industry quite a bit. I've created some show posters for other performers. And, a deck of cards I did with a guy named DeVoe von Schadenrich. He owns Handlords, and they do the extreme manipulation of playing cards. So we did a deck of cards that became the most successful custom deck of cards in history, which is lovely. We're still
Awesome.
holding that record.
That's a fun and not common record to hold. So that's
Not a common record, no. Not an easy one to break. You'd be surprised to learn how many custom decks of cards there are out there.
Let's do a virtual tour of your website. I'm gonna share the screen, and we'll go through some pieces to see, and like just narrate what you see. Let's see. You see it all right there?
I do see it. I see myself peeking over.
Yeah.
That photo is kind of funny. That photo was shot, it looks like a Saturday Night Live photograph. That photograph was shot when I opened for a little band called Jane's Addiction.
That's a nice gig there.
Yeah, it was a good gig. It was fun. It was a little uncomfortable because the two leads, Perry and Dave, were still not getting along. So they didn't even cross each other on stage, which was interesting. But that was a fun night, nevertheless. I think I performed for 7,500 people that night. That's
a good show. All right, so let's take a look at what kind of your hat rack here. So you do a variety of different things. You have clearly a feature show that you've put together over the years. You're a keynote speaker. You're clearly a professional guest as you are guesting on this show here. MC and mentor. So these are all basically the things that people want to hire the world's most amazing mentalist. They come to your website and contact you, correct?
Yes. Thanks for the advertisement. Those are all accurate.
All right, so here's a little video. I'm gonna play this video, then I'm gonna make it full screen, and then
okay.
Then let's just we'll keep talking through and see where it takes us.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen it in quite some time.
What are your specialties?
All right.
I am mostly known for
A little morning television show that was in Colorado, and little intro animation. I drew all of this stuff.
Oh, fantastic. So would you say the bulk of your career has been based in Colorado, or have you been do you often tour?
I do get to tour, which is fantastic. I always say I'm a perfect American in that I only speak one language. So if I am in Europe, I concentrate, of course, on English-speaking markets, but Colorado has been the bulk of my work, I suppose. I like being at home.
Cool. Yeah, like I was bummed that I didn't get to see your show at the Stanley. That I was super hoping to get to see that.
The Stanley Hotel, that was a great experience. I really enjoyed that a whole lot. That was, interestingly, it felt a lot like touring, but my audience was coming to me instead of myself going to them, if that makes any sense.
Well, after we watch this, maybe we could watch that trailer, because that was a beautifully shot trailer that you made.
Oh yes, it was lovely. This is as I'm watching this video, it's time for a new one. I have one being cut right now.
It's pretty. It's got some good stuff in there. I like your mask there, your blindfold.
Oh yes, that's a common closer material for me. People ask me to do that bit of business virtually every show I do. This was shot in a nightclub here in Colorado, specifically Denver. It's called Lanny's Clock Tower Cabaret at the time that this was shot. Now it is called the Clock Tower Cabaret, and it's in one of our big landmarks here in Denver. And I did 14 years worth of shows at the Clock Tower Cabaret.
That's a good amount of shows.
That's a lot of shows. Yeah, I was there as many as 3 nights a week.
I'm glad Denver supports the variety arts so adamantly.
The venue itself is, I think it got mostly famous for the burlesque shows. So I often appeared in the burlesque shows as a variety artist, very similar to a vaudeville kind of show. And then I produced a few shows down in there too.
It's yeah, burlesque is a pretty big thing today still.
It's enjoyed a pretty remarkable renaissance beginning, I would say, in the mid 1990s up until now. And I've seen, having been part of the burlesque world for that many years, I've certainly seen an evolution of the art form. It's not quite what it was, but still going strong as far as I'm aware.
When you do these shows, like, do you sort of, are you the MC in between each act, or, you know?
I've done a lot of MC work for sure. There are a lot of, it seems more prevalent in the earlier years, and by earlier I mean, you know, as long ago as 15, 20 years ago, but they had a lot of respect for the original format of burlesque, which included a lot of variety acts, whether it be a comedian or a torch singer or a juggler or some clown like me.
So you used to be an Andy Warhol historian? Like
I studied Warhol for over a decade actually, and I was listed as a Warhol historian.
Part of the reason I, you know, have finally started this podcast is because I don't have my art gallery to go to currently because we are in the middle of the insane pandemic. And so I myself had to start thinking creatively about moving forward, because I mean, honestly, I don't, as much as I want to say this will be all over in a week or two, I don't know that that's going to be the case. And I think as artists and creatives, it's important to sort of keep moving forward and pivoting and using the sort of creativity, the creative tools that we've, you know, gained throughout the years to figure out solutions to problems. And we've just been hit with a major problem. Like almost every artistic media, performance, theater, music, like the acting, you know, fine arts, and all of it has just been smacked in the face with, one, we're not considered a necessity by many. So there, you know, which is, may or may not be the case. I mean, there is the case that, like, we are the thing that keeps the human race sane.
Yes.
And balanced. But how do we get like our creativity to people, like with, you know, in safe, realistic fashion, like doing podcasts and the like is, you know, one way, but for yourself, where it's like such a interactive theatrical experience, do you find yourself thinking about how to move that into the future? Like, I mean, we might be stuck in a world full of people that have like so much PTSD that they don't want to touch another human being for another year. So how does one continue doing that type of magic?
There is, as you can imagine, there is an intense dialogue about that very fact in the magic industry, because, you know, largely a lot of us rely on that interaction with an audience, if not physical interaction. And there's some of that in several of my shows where I have people up on stage and I physically interact with them.
Yeah.
And it's certainly a consideration that I may not be able to do that anymore. In the cruise ship industry, for example, you can have a cruise director say, okay, we're going to get back on the ship and we'd love to have you do your show again, but this time you can't touch anybody, or this time you can't have anybody on stage, or this time you have to wear gloves through the whole thing. You know, there's a lot of playing card manipulation that isn't really as easy with rubber gloves on, of course.
Yeah.
So we're trying to explore not necessarily ways around it, but certainly how to compensate for not being able to have that interaction. I can tell you that a lot of magicians are performing shows just like you and I are speaking now, with for companies or families who are stuck at home. They are performing this way, and I have a fair amount of material that would allow me to do that. I just haven't put it together yet because I'm trying to look at a larger picture. And to be honest, being cooped up and homebound for as long as we've been, I've gone back to my visual arts side, which has been cathartic and satisfying both. But
Are there any visual arts pieces that you would like to share and talk about?
I'm filling orders right now of a very strange thing that I've encountered. It was a few years ago for a burlesque show that I wanted to have a cigar box with cigars in it on stage, and I wanted them to be props. And I was aware that there used to be a man who carved wooden ones and painted them up, and they looked pretty good. So I tried to look him up, and his website had been shut down and he was no longer making them. So I just made some myself. I carved up a bunch and carved some that look like they're lighted or lit, and I put a little fluorescent paint so that on stage I could have them kick on a black light and they looked like the real thing. So that kind of caught on, and I went ahead and put it on my website under the merchandise area. And despite the resistance to anything tobacco related, magicians still do a lot of magic tricks with cigars, and jugglers use cigars and that kind of thing. So like I said, I put it on the website, and I have been filling cigar orders. So I've been carving cigars for about 4 days straight now.
There you go. That's awesome. That's
it's a weird niche, a very, very narrow niche that I got into.
Yeah, but you got there, and that's what counts. So
sure.
is there any way that I could is there any little bit of magic that you might be able to do now, like for the itty-bitty window?
I'll give that some thought. I may have the supplies here to put something together for you. I'll give it a little thought, and I'll try to hit you by the end of this.
All right, that would be super cool. Where can I find your video that went viral about bleaching artwork?
Oh gosh,
is it under your name?
That was a good 18 years ago, I believe. If you just Google Phelyx, which is the terrible spelling, Phelyx, bleach, it'll come up. It was reposted all over Pinterest. It was initially created for a website called stencilrevolution.com. And while they still have that tutorial, I created it when it was a street art forum. There was amazing collection of street artists, and several of them rather famous, who were part of the original stencilrevolution.com. They unfortunately created a great network with no method by which to monetize, so it had to, the URL got sold off to a different stencil company, which is a little more Martha Stewart than it is Banksy. I was initially hired by a clothing company in, I would say, 2002. And they wanted me to explore and develop ways that would allow them to, instead of applying artwork to a t-shirt or silk screening artwork to a t-shirt, their concept, just somebody's great idea was that we want to figure out how to tattoo the artwork into the fabric so that it becomes part of the fabric. So the first thing that I thought of was bleach, and I went into development on that. And I remember at the time I had a studio that was large enough you could park 4 or 5 cars in it, but I had different stations all over of different ways to apply bleach to fabric, whether it was I created a gel bleach that we could silk screen. I created several different spray bleaches. I created bleach paints. I created a photo process similar to the way you make silk screens. And it all came down to the most effective and easiest way for me to do it was to simply spray the bleach. And I didn't have to worry about stop baths or retardants. I didn't have to slow the effects of the bleach. I just had to use the right fabrics. So the big secret about that is a good 50-50 cotton blend works great. So those are inexpensive. The bleach is probably the cheapest art supply that you could possibly get your hands on, except for now. I guess it's in bigger demand these days, but
yeah, it's interesting how few things are available in the stores these days that were once common.
I have a good supply still.
That's good. That's good. That helps
because you don't run through too much of it when you're spraying bleach. But
you gotta keep your place sanitized.
Yes, yeah. Although it's not good for your lungs.
No, not. Well, it's just don't inhale it. Don't huff your bleach. I think that's,
you have to wear the mask and don't wear anything that you love because you're spraying bleach.
Unless it's white already.
If it's white already, well, it's now bleached. I worked with 100% cotton shirts, a little higher end product, I suppose.
Yeah.
And bleach will eat holes in the fabric very quickly.
Well, it's not a healthy product.
No.
Have you thought of any tricks? The Zoom only gives us about 40 minutes.
Let's try something. I think I've decided we'll try something that I believe everybody can play along with. So
Okay.
If you'll forgive me, I'm going to stand up so that I can make. I'm going to write down a prediction.
Absolutely.
And we'll try an experiment that everybody can play along with. So I'll get a card.
All right, sounds good to me.
I have a card. I need to make a prediction first, or this won't make sense, of course. And then I'll leave the prediction out here in full view so that people can see that I won't switch it out. But let me begin with, we'll go with creatures today. Almost done.
My little drum roll.
Okay, I have a prediction. I'm going to leave it here. That's in view, yes?
Yes.
Good. So here's what I'd love for you to do, and everybody can play along, of course, but we'll have you begin by thinking of a country first, so a country like Ireland or something. Just think of a country, the name of the country, and I want you to imagine the way that country's name is spelled. And as you go through the spelling, let's go with the final letter of the spelling of your country. I want you to just take that last letter of the spelling of your country, and let's begin with an insect. So we'll have you use that last letter as the beginning, the start of the spelling of an insect, and I'll have you think of that insect. So this may not work for everybody. This is purely experimental, but you begin with a country.
I got my
The last letter is the beginning letter of a type of insect, and you can spell that one easily too.
I'm trying to think of an insect. You got to give me a second to think of an insect with the right letter.
Sure, or you can switch a country if you'd like. You can go to another country if you like.
Okay. All right. So, okay, got it.
Good. We have nothing prearranged, right? So you haven't. I didn't give you any guidelines.
I put you completely on
I just
the
made
spot.
this up on the spot, really.
Yeah.
So we have an insect that begins with that letter.
Yeah.
And you can picture the spelling of whatever this insect is called.
Correct.
I'd like for you to go to the end of the spelling of that and take that last letter of the spelling of the insect, and let's have you use that for the beginning letter of the first, let's say, wild animal that comes to mind. So the first wild animal that comes to mind that begins with that letter.
Oh, okay.
And now you have a wild animal in mind. Let's go with the spelling of the name of the animal or what type of animal this is, and we'll go to the final letter of that. And I'd love for you to think of a type of bird that begins with that last letter of the type of animal that you just came up with.
Okay.
This is the most difficult part.
Yeah, I'm trying to hang on to the letter so I don't lose it, and I got to figure out a bird that has that letter.
It begins with.
So do you want me to give you the letter?
Don't tell me. You can just come up with the type of bird.
Okay. Let's see. I'm getting there. Okay, got it.
You got one? Okay,
yes.
Great. So we can just leave it at that. But you've come up with 3 creatures at this point.
Correct.
With beginning with a country that I don't even know what the country is.
Yes.
This will not work for everybody, I don't believe. But I think that with a couple of subtle suggestions that I placed in there, that it's going to work for a lot of people. In fact, I encourage anybody who hears this and was lovely enough to play along, write in and let us know if we got this right. You'll remember the prediction is here.
Okay.
We have 3 creatures. The creatures that I came up with, I can show you. I came up with ant, tiger, raven was something I thought of. I crossed it out and wrote robin. So that is going to work for a large number of people in your audience.
That was pretty awesome.
Yours wasn't correct, was it?
My brain is a little broken and doesn't really think in linear fashions. Would you like to know what the story that was going on in my brain as I was melting down while I?
Yes, and I encourage you also. I want to hear the story, your internal dialogue, but I encourage you to try this later with someone else. You can try this. You can do this at home.
All right.
But
so,
yes, what were yours?
So the first question was the country. So I went with Germany.
Okay.
And then you said think of an insect. Germany ends in a Y, so I went with yellow jacket.
Nice. Okay.
So and then yellow jacket ends in a T. So the creature I came up with was Tasmanian devil.
Nice. You do think a little differently than most.
And then devil ends in an L. And so I was like, what kind of bird ends in an L? I was like my brain just kept going farther and farther out. And so I ended up on laricaete.
Wow.
But that's the problem with my head. It goes way.
What you will discover, and here's the big secret to this, is to have your audience go fairly quickly in response.
Yes.
But most countries that people will think of end in the letter A, which sets you off on the right track.
Okay.
So Germany would fall off of that. That's part of the reason that I suggest I say a country like Ireland, because that ends in a D. So I've eliminated Ireland from the big list of countries, most of which end in the letter A. That is how that works. But I am curious if anybody who's listening or watching, if we got this right for you.
Where can people find you out? Like, what is your website again?
My website is my name. That's the URL is one of the oldest websites on the internet, but that's because my name was so misspelled. The URL is available. It is phelyx.com.
All right, and before we sign off, let's take a look at. Let's just talk about the Stanley Hotel gig a little bit.
Welcome to a magical place.
So this is where The Shining was shot, right?
That's what people believe. Unfortunately, not one scene of The Shining was filmed. Not one frame was filmed at the Stanley Hotel.
Was it
But it was
strictly
based on
inspiration?
Stephen King wrote it about the Stanley.
Okay.
He stayed there. I have seen people in the lobby of the Stanley Hotel just break into tears when they go on their pilgrimage to the Stanley Hotel and learn that none of The Shining was filmed there.
But
I will tell you though that in this room where it's filming, Stephen King had to wait 15 years to buy back the rights to The Shining from Stanley Kubrick.
Yes.
And he bought them back, and then it was in the late 1990s that Stephen King produced his own version of The Shining, which was aired on television. It was a long film, but that room, a lot of it took place in that room. He filmed every bit of it at the actual Stanley Hotel, and the stage that I used at the Stanley was built for the TV show, and that was his favorite set piece. So there's still some Shining connection there.
Well, I mean, given the fact that it was the original inspiration, that's even more important.
It was the original inspiration for sure. Yeah.
But so how did
King and his wife were driving, and they needed a place to stay almost as an emergency, and they were in fact the only guests at the hotel that night.
That's amazing and creepy. I have had the good fortune to paid it a visit, and I didn't get to stay there. I just we hiked in the area and checked out the hotel, and
Sure.
It definitely has a vibe to it. When I saw you were doing a show that was special to that was pretty exciting.
I really enjoyed it.
How did that come about? Like, do you have
that came about through connections that I have with other entertainers. There was a magician called Aidan Sinclair who performed at the Stanley for a couple of years prior to me. And then I was set up with a residency performance there for the entirety of last summer and part of last spring. And that ended right as Labor Day came around. And they had a new performer who goes by the name of Claire Voyant. She's also a friend of mine. And she performed there up until recently, until they closed the hotel.
Yeah, every hotel's closed at this point.
Oh yeah, it's all COVID related, of course.
Yeah. Well, stay safe, my friend. It was great getting to talk to you. Thanks for being my second guest in the show. And we have fun wearing masks and staying virus free.
Oh yes, I have my mask here, so I'll make sure that I'm safe. But have me on anytime. I really enjoyed it.
Can we see that mask? It looks awful big.
Oh sure, yes.
that is a perfect mask. I think you'll be very safe.
I like that it has a nice 1960s sci-fi vibe.
Just put a little duct tape around the collar, seal it up.
Oh yes, absolutely.
All right, man. Take care. I'll see you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, folks, that's the show. I hope you enjoyed experiencing my brain short circuit. If the good professor was able to read your mind, please let us know in the comments below. And if he wasn't, please let us know, or let me know, what kind of crazy mental gymnastics your brain did as well. Maybe you're just as broken as I am. If you want to connect with the good professor, please find him on all the social media profile handles at Professor Phelyx. That is Professor Phelyx. Phelyx. Professor Phelyx. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw, please consider subscribing to us on YouTube and all the major podcast distribution networks, liking the Facebook page, following us on Instagram, on Twitter, and supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Artsy Fartsy Show. That's it for now. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay weird, and stay awesome. Catch you guys in the next episode.
This show is brought to you by Embrace the Weird, a lifestyle brand for weirdos. From original crazy t-shirt designs to handmade eccentric earrings, they have everything you need to embrace your inner weirdo. Please visit embracetheweird.design for more.
Support this show. Patreon, support this show. And buy some merch, please support this show. On Patreon, please support this show.